And we are live. Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's. My name is 𝑰𝒏𝒕𝒆𝒏𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍. Today's webinar is organized by the Punch Media Foundation, and it is to commemorate the International Women's Day. This webinar is convened under the theme "For All Women and Girls: Rights, Equality, Empowerment." And I must say that it comes at a very significant time in our lives, and especially when it comes to women's rights issues, especially in developing countries like ours, Nigeria. Well, I'm just going to be giving you a brief about before we go into the conversation proper. According to the United Nations Women 2024, gender disparities in education, employment, and leadership persist despite global efforts to bridge the gap. The World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report, published in 2024, actually stated that at the current rate, that it will take about 130 years to achieve full gender parity. Let's bring it closer home. Right here in Nigeria, the Gender in Nigeria 2025 report that was published by 𝑰𝒏𝒕𝒆𝒏𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏 indicated that 29.3% of women think that a husband is justified in beating his wife for any of these 6 reasons. I'm going to list out the reasons. Number 1, going out without telling him. Number 2, neglecting the children. Number 3, arguing with him. Number 4, refusing sex. Number 5, burning the food. Number 6, cheating on him. It gets interesting. 48.2% of women believe that a husband is justified in beating his wife for any of these reasons. 23.7% of men think that it is acceptable for a man to beat his wife for any of the reasons that I've just mentioned. And 37.3% of men believe that a husband is justified in beating his wife for any of the 5 or 6 reasons that I've listed out. However, do you know what makes the difference in all of this? Education. According to the study, they found that the rate of women's approval of wife battery was inversely proportional to their educational level. That means the higher level of educational attainment of a woman, the less likely she is to approve of wife battery or domestic abuse in any form. And it is on that note that I will be inviting our communication lead at PMF, Punch Media Foundation, Taufik Sani, for the opening remarks for this webinar today. Taufik Sani, you're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call you all distinguished guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. So, you're welcome to the International Women's Day 2025 edition of the Punch webinar series. I am Taufik once again from the communications lead at Punch Media Foundation. Since our inception in 2019, PMF has been a catalyst for change. We've been empowering communities through accountability journalism, digital innovation, public policy advocacy, and media development. All of this to engender a just, inclusive, and thriving civic space. Our current webinar series is a flagship initiative set up to mark two United Nations International Day. It aims to spotlight and tackle issues that are critical to sustainable development goals. Today's webinar themes for all women and girls, rights, equality, empowerment is a bold call, challenge prevailing narrative, and to dismantle systemic barriers and drive policy reform. By empowering women and girls, we unlock the full potential of our communities from education and economic independence to leadership and civic participation. We've had an exceptional lineup of thought leaders. I mean, the names alone, we can trace their work, we can trace the things they've done, the high impact projects they've had. That's why they are here today to speak to us about what we are doing today, about channeling and starting the sport. These leaders, they are ready to share their insights and inspire actionable dialogue. I encourage you all to actively engage and contribute to this important conversation. Let's harness our collective energy and drive civic change together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taufik. Thank you very much. And that was a wonderful opening remarks by move on with this conversation. And I need to remind everyone that this conversation is being recorded, documentation and purpose. And like he said earlier, please feel free to make your comments known, share your opinions, thoughts, and feel free to use the comment section, the chat section, and the Q&A section of to give us your feedback. We'll be looking forward to those. And I'm also saying that for this webinar, we will be using these official hashtags on social media handles, and that's IWD 2025 webinar series accelerate action. I'll take those hashtags again. The hashtags are hashtag IWD 2025, hashtag Punch webinar series, and hashtag accelerate action. Before we get into the conversation proper, I'm just going to be liaising with my tech team. We have a short poll, just 3 questions that we'd like you to take. It's just with your readiness and then your thoughts about the conversations that we will be having today. So tech team, can you give me a signal or confirm that okay. Just give us a few minutes and we'll get to the poll. Okay, yes, we have the poll now. Kindly, ladies and gentlemen, please vote. Just 3 questions is just to get your feedback about the discussions that we're having today, and then we'll take it on from there. Please engage with the poll. 3 questions only. The number 1 question says, do women and girls have equal rights as men and boys? Sphere of influence. Your options are yes, absolutely. To some extent, the next option says, and the last option says not at all. Kindly engage with the poll, please. The second question says, have you or someone you know faced gender-based discrimination? Also, responsive, yes, frequently. Second option, occasionally. Third option, never. Can you see the poll? Please engage. And the third question says, what is the biggest obstacle to accelerating progress for women and girls today? The options include limited access to resources and opportunities, persistent gender stereotypes and bias, and safety and security concerns. We are with your votes, and we can proceed. And if you have any challenges with accessing the poll, kindly state so in the chat section. We'll take that on. Oh, great. Thank you very much, Olorun Toba. Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, Deborah. I did the last call. Thank you. Yeah. Good. Thank you, Mr. Hobby. Thank you so much, sir. ID Blessing, thank you for taking this poll. Mr. Lale, thank you, sir. The peace flower, thank you. Great. I see quite a lot of responses here. Adewale, a lot of blooming. Elito, Ramat, thank you. Adinaka. Okay. So in a few moments, we'll get the results of the poll and then I'll read it out to you. Nampa, thank you. Animal Sham Sawa, yeah. Thank you for participating in the poll. I also have the poll results. I'll read that, read those out. Yes, the results are in. So to the number one question that there is, do women and girls have equal rights as men and boys in your community or sphere of influence? The answer is 49% of the participants, of our participants here, says to some extent. Interesting. The second question, have you or faced gender-based discrimination? Again, we have 49% voting for occasionally. And the last question, what is the biggest obstacle to accelerate progress for women and girls today? Wow, more than 50% of participants here say persistent gender stereotypes and bias. I guess that telling, very telling. Thank you very much for participating in the poll this morning, and we'll move on from that to the main conversation. But before we get to the discussants for this webinar today, I'm just going to be reading out a brief profile of every one of our discussants and also introducing them. Okay, before we go into that, please permit me, indulge me in this instance. I would like every one of our discussants, Melanie, Prof, Mr. Amzat, and Mr. Adekeji Jayoba, please put on your camera so we can get a snapshot before we go into the conversation proper. Thank you so much for doing that, obliging. Thank you. I can see Prof already. Mr. Amzat, please, your camera so we can get a picture, and then we can the main business for today. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Ganta. Melanie, Ms. Jayoba. Okay, texting. Once we are done with this, we'll move on to the conversation. Yes, we are ready. We are ready for the picture. Okay, once they are done, we'll move on. Okay, so okay, and that has been taken, the picture has been taken. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to go back to reading the profile and introducing all of our discussants this morning. I'm going to start off with Professor Bolanle Clara Simeon Bayomi. Professor is a distinguished academic and strategic leader in adult education and lifelong learning. Professor Simeon Bayomi has not only redefined educational paradigms, but also served as the chair of several national committees on lifelong learning. Over the past few years, she has acted as a consultant to international organizations, steering policy reforms and innovative program development that have transformed adult education across multiple states. Professor Simeon Fayomi is empowering women and promoting gender equality through innovative teaching methods, research, and community engagement. Her visionary leadership and commitment to empowering women and communities have earned her accolades both from academic circles and government bodies. Let us welcome, at least give us some claps in the comment section. Welcome, Prof. And for this conversation today, we will be exploring how education, leadership, and economic empowerment serve as catalysts for women's advancement and broader societal development. Welcome, Prof. Please some claps for Prof in the comment section. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm moving on to our Thank you, Prof. for coming on. I'll just read out the profile of the other discussants and then we'll move on to the conversation proper. Mr. Hamzat Lawal is also one of our panelists this morning, and he is a visionary in the intersection of public policy and digital innovation. Hamzat Lawal has continually leveraged his expertise to bridge the gap between government initiatives and sustainable economic development. Before founding Connected Development, he served on advisory boards for fintech startups and governmental communities, focused on financial inclusion. His recent strategic initiatives have catalyzed several groundbreaking projects, notably expanding access to financial services for women entrepreneurs and fueling broader national growth. For this conversation, Mr. Hamzat Lawal will be focusing on how the government can strategically drive development through financial income for women. You're welcome, Mr. Hamzat. Nice to have you on board. And my next panelist is Ms. 𝑰𝒏𝒕𝒆𝒏𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏. Pardon me, please. She is a seasoned lawyer with over 17 years of cross-sector innovation, who founded the 𝑰𝒏𝒕𝒆𝒏𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏 Foundation. She is currently the lead partner at Streetland Law Practice in Lagos, Nigeria. She is a law graduate from Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, and holds executive certification from the University of Texas at Austin and St. Francis Xavier University, Canada. For our work in protecting women and children's rights. Our accolades include Her Majesty the Queen's Commonwealth Point of Light Award, HRH the Prince of Wales Young Sustainability Entrepreneur Prize, the U.S. Department of State Leadership Impact Award, and being named a White House entrepreneur by President Barack Obama, along with being a two-time speaker at the United Nations Social Goods Summit, with our work featured on the VGC and similar platforms. For this conversation this morning, Ms. 𝑗ayoba will be highlighting legal frameworks, maternal health, and grassroots activism as critical to security. And next, oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Ms. 𝑗ayoba. Nice to have you on the conversation this morning. And to my next discussant and panel member, that will be Melanie Ishola. She is a trailblazing multimedia journalist and staunch advocate for women and girl child's rights. Melanie Ishola has spent almost 2 decades challenging systemic biases through incisive storytelling. She is a passionate gender advocate, leading international campaigns alongside a team of young advocates for the Don't Cut Her movement. aimed at combating female gender mutilation. Beyond a dynamic role in the media, she has held senior positions where she led investigative teams and contributed to policy advisory panels at international gender forums. In recent years, her award-winning coverage has redefined media representation and earned commendations from human rights organizations. For today's conversation, she will be exploring media representation, systemic biases, and cultural barriers affecting gender parity. Again, welcome, Melanie. Nicola, on this conversation. So, my panelists, you are all welcome. You're all welcome. Thank you very much for coming and joining your voice to this very critical conversation that we are having today. So, to kickstart this conversation, I'm going to call on Professor Simeon Fayomi to share thoughts, especially in the area of um, in terms of women and girls. Please share. I think you have like 7 to 8 minutes to give us your opening remarks and share your thoughts. And Prof. Mark, I would like to do at the end of the conversation do on solutions, because I've had so many talks, but we want to look at what solutions, what things that we can do and use to improve the law of women and girls in Nigeria. Thank you very much, Mark. You have the floor.
Yeah, I'm very thrilled to be here this morning. And I have with me my professor here. It's interesting that together, once she knew about the program, she said she would want to be here with me. So meet Professor Lorne Aalborg University. Professor Lorne Aalborg University. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello. It's a great activity you have today, and I'm really thank you for inviting me to say hello. And we are it's a very important topic you are discussing, and I look forward to follow all the nice comments from the panel. So I'll just sit here beside.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay. All right. So welcome everyone again. I am very pleased to be here, and like the leader of the session have said, I would want to say a few things about women empowerment and education. One of the things that we have found, probably through comments from people who are out of the education system, is that we believe that schooling is the same thing as education. And I personally have said it is not. Many times we think once we send our children to school, once they graduate from school, that makes them more empowered than the other person. You may be surprised to know that our market women who never went to school, some of them are even more empowered than young women who have been to school. So this morning I'm looking at education from the point of functionality. What does education bring to us? How does it affect us and our social skills? How do we convert what we have learned in school or what we think we know in the academic? How do we convert it to something that is reasonable and useful for us in our day-to-day activity? So these are the things I'll be discussing with us this morning. First, I want to say that education enables us, to be self-sufficient, to work with ourselves and with others, to make informed decisions about our life, to be what we would also call independent in our way of thinking. If anybody has gone through real schooling, or what we call real academic, or what we would now call education, that person should be empowered enough to live a self-sufficient life. So And we have found now in our society that even those who are well educated cannot be said to be self-sufficient. Many of our people look at job from the point they look at workplace from the point of getting a job, a white-collar job. Many people are not looking at it as a point of self-empowering. And some other person will be talking about entrepreneurship. I appreciate that. But in reality also, we need to understand that for our women, the power, like the poll you just conducted, the power that lies in the society to give us what we need to be who we want to be is enormous. And our society is not ready to give that to us. Our society, most of the time, because we are patriarchal in nature, want to limit the freedom of the woman. You were quoting some of the review of a research when we were starting, and it says that many people are still saying that if my wife don't cook for me, then I can divorce her. If she doesn't give me enough sex, I can divorce her. These are the things that women go through in our society that makes them look as if they have not been to school. And this is very important. Now, let me now talk from my point as an adult educator. The thought of informal, okay, we have three parts to education when we look at it, and my area in education is the most elaborate, so to say. We have three sessions in education. We have the part of the informal, we have the part of the formal, and of course, we have the non-formal. We have found that the informal part of education constitutes about 60% of what we really need to learn, which include the soft skills, the people skills, that which we also call the social skills, to be able to stand in the society. And for every woman, you would find that this can only be learned from home. And maybe if you find yourself in a circumstance where you can also learn. In schooling also, you will find that also what we try to do in school, 70% of it could be said to be theoretical, but the 30 part of it is practical. And that practical is what constitutes of the informal learning. For an adult educator, I've come to know that there are unique needs and experiences of women from different backgrounds. And when these unique needs and what they need to become is not given, then they may not likely ever be what they really want to be. Their background already sets them to the ground. And this is also primary, when it comes to our thoughts as adult educators. Many educators are online. I should greet them too because they're here to hear. Thank you very much for coming, colleagues. I appreciate you. All right, I'm also moving on because I know I have just a few minutes. Now let me talk about access to quality education that could enhance opportunities for women. There was this talk I had. I did not want to say a lot of stories because I'm a professional storyteller and I didn't want to go on. But this one is very critical. Somebody met a young woman and said, "Oh, do you know that men are more important than women?" And she said, "Really?" And she was chewing gum and blowing the bubble, one of the things that only young women and women can do without any problem. And so she was saying, "You think so?" And the man said, "Yes, of course." He said, "Well, I don't think so." And the young man looked at her and said, "So what do you mean? We gave the world the light bulb. Men did that. Men are the richest in the world. Men drive the best of cars in the world." And she said, "Yeah, that's very good to note. But I think all of them were given birth to by a woman." That shows you the power of a woman. And she said it so nonchalantly because it is understood that women do have power. but how do we allow them to function in the society where they found themselves? Access to quality education until now is a big problem for many women. In the northern part, for instance, our women are in Puda, and many of them are not given the formal education before they go married. Many of them married quite young. We're not here to talk about early marriage, but many of them married quite young, become mothers. We have that argument within the adult education sector. And when this voting period comes up in Nigeria all the time, people kept asking questions. Women who are just 12 years old, are they supposed to vote? Can they vote? Are they not children? According to the legal constitution of Nigeria, they are not supposed to vote. But, we know, you and I know and understand very well that these women already have social responsibility, which is one of the things we, use to look at who is an adult. They have social responsibilities, they have children, they have husband, they even provide something for the economy situation of their family. They work in their own little way. So would we not consider them as adults? So this is one problem. They don't have access to quality education that could enhance their opportunities. Even many of us that are in the Western, in the Southern, it's the same. That we sometimes have to compete with our male counterparts for opportunities within our workplaces. And of course, once it comes to that, men are likely to get it, and that was the answer to the poll. We have limited access, and this is important, especially when it comes to education. Lastly, I want to talk about some things which I think could help us, like you have said. Number one, we need to address these systemic barriers, systemic barriers that put women at a disadvantage. First could be maybe having child care support in Nigeria. I think we are one of the nations where nothing is said about child support. And all over the world, I know very well that women get support for childcare. Number two is that we have flexible scheduling for their work. I know that people want to say that we will not have women in our workplaces because they are lazy. That is not true. That is absolutely not true. Women are great workers. Women have this intuition that brings out innovation. So you cannot talk about women as lazy, but there are other schedules. Being mothers, being wives, have a way of including into what they need to do. And so the flexibility could help them when it comes to their own kind of work schedule. Another part is that we should promote digital literacy at this point in Nigeria. There is the need to do that, to provide basic computer skills education, safety, digital tool for learning and entrepreneurship. And I also say that apart from that, we should encourage mentorship. A lot of our young women are not being mentored. They have no figure to look at, no, we call them idols, no idols, to look at. And this is very important because when people have mentors, they already have a channel that they are putting in their energy. They already have a thought in their head about who is leading them and what they want to become. This is very essential. And within the mentorship, there is also a connection for women. I've always said it, women should stand together. But in Nigeria, you find that women rarely stand together. Women rarely stand. Okay, we may be in an association where we have celebrations, and then we take ashwebi, and then we dance, we go for marriages. But for what could become the real essence of us belonging to the society, many association of women don't have that. You don't have association of women who are looking to make 10 PhDs of women in a year. We don't have association where women come together to push their children into higher learning, you know, by seeking for positions and all of that. Even in the Senate of Nigeria, we have just how many women, you know, compared to the men that are there. So we don't have women that want to push the other person, you know, the other woman into the limelight. And many of the men will tell you that we women, we are the problem of women, that they are not our problem, you know, because of course, men will not naturally vote for a woman, but women can vote for women, and we don't vote for women. We know that. So these things are basic, and you know, things that we should think about, you know, when we go into the further discussion. And so I would end by saying that lifelong learning, where I belong, is crucial. Lifelong learning for women help them to adapt from time to time in the economy sector, in the changing economy, in social landscape. You know, I wasn't a professor when I began my life, you know, but because there is a continuous path to lifelong learning, I kept going on and on. So continuous learning promotes women employability and career advancement, which I think is very important for them to stay competitive in the labor market. So let me stay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was a loaded. Thank you so much, Ma.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Well, we got off to a very good start for this conversation this morning. Thank you so much, Prof. And Professor John, thank you again for popping off, showing us your face once again. Okay, so I'm going to recognize our chairman of Punch Nigeria Limited, Mrs. Angela Emowa. Thank you for joining us today. You're welcome, ma'am. And now we'll move on with our conversation once again. And this time around, we will move on to Mr. Hamzat Lawal, the founder of Connected Development. Sir, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Mr. Hamzat Lawal.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I really like the theme of this conversation, and when I was asked to look at what government has done, it gave me an opportunity to do a deep dive research on what government has done, what are the gaps, what are the opportunities, and how can critical stakeholders, even some of us that are here, can play an active role. Papa is on the call. Papa is on the call.
Hello, sir.
Please, just to confirm, can you still hear me, please?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, fantastic. I'm trying to put on my video. Okay. Thank you again. So first, let's talk about the policy framework and some of the strategic initiatives that government have put in place. And when we look at the Nigerian National Financial Inclusion Strategy, so Nigeria has an inclusion strategy that targets an annual of targets about 80% formal financial inclusion rate by 2020. Well, because the strategy talks about, you know, achieving it in 2020, even if we're in 2025, it has not yet been reviewed. So, and this says women will be a priority group. And some of the key initiative talks about MSME development funds, which looks about 220 billion Naira intervention, with 60% of this money, which is about 132 billion, a mark for women to address credit barriers. That's according to our government. They also look at the gender landscape study. So there's a study that looks at the gender landscape. And this also identified barriers like limiting income, education, and trust in financial service providers. Because again, we've seen that when women want to access loan, credit, or funds generally, there's a lot of barrier even within the financial sector. So what the government now tries to do is to create a framework where they build a guide that allows the sector to be gender friendly, which looks at product design and supported by a grant. So what they did was to create an incentive that's a form of a grant so more women can access. So what are the progress we've done so far, according to the report when I was in my research? The disparities still persist. There's still a gender gap that looks at about financial inclusion of women roses from 69.1%, that was in 2018, to 70% in 2023. But the gap has widened to about 9% when you look at the data between men and women. So men is about 79% inclusion, but you see women are still behind. Now, when we look at economic empowerment, only 22% of Nigerian women are economically empowered. Now, if you look at data and look at the statistics of, gender disaggregated data, see only 22% of Nigerian women. And what this also means is women from poor households, which are mostly domiciled in rural area, or what you call villages, cannot send their children to school, particularly girl child, because a lot of time in this family, sadly, even if in 2025, when a woman gives birth, when a family gives birth to a girl child, she's not usually prioritized. They say, well, at the long run, she's going to get married off. So why would the family wants to invest or empower her to go to school? And with the former savings users, so we also look at, how many times do these women save? And about 69% or 6.9% times they sort of save and they create what, they call a Asusu group, just to also ensure they can save this money, give one person, so the person is empowered enough to continue to fend for their family. But I also look at the digital adoption, because when you look at financial inclusion, because now we're in a digital era, what has government done to boost empowerment? And what I see is just about 1.36%. But yet rural women still face barrier, because when you look at infrastructure, there's not enough infrastructure. There's not of internet penetration. But if you even look at some communities that have mobile network and have internet, in most cases, they're very expensive. So rural women cannot even afford to subscribe data. Now let's look at budgetary commitment and funding gaps. The 2025 federal government budget allocation looks about 148 billion to women economic empowerment. That's a 17.7 increase from 2024. However, there is low share funding constituents for about 0.29% of this total budget to capital expenditure, limiting impact. So again, if you want to empower women, you're still not investing in the infrastructure that is needed, because you have to deal with hardware, and hardware is all of this technology. And then the software is, directly giving these women the resources. But when we also fragmented this data, about 68.5 billion is for grants and financial support, while 68 billion for Nigerian Women Project around health and advocacy receiving minimal funding. And you see, if you look at healthcare, this is one sector that really affects women, because as much as we talk about women empowerment, without good healthcare system, we're still dealing with maternal mortality, which is really high in the country. So I want to talk a bit about the barrier and some of the key challenge as we talk about access, but there's also a high fee of what some of these financial inclusion method. So there's a high fee of the rate itself. So if they want to access loan, for instance, the payback time is short, but then the premium on this payback is relatively high. And a lot of women are deterred on the micro entrepreneurs because now they can't access loan. And then you have a lot of these fees, embedded in it. So there's also a cultural norm because a lot of household responsibility limited when it comes to, so a lot of household limits women itself because, the previous speaker talked about some of this imperative, particularly, in northern Nigeria. We've seen this persistent, sadly, Papa is speaking. But there's an agent network, interestingly, that has been expanding in rural community. Before now, there was 631 agents per 100,000 adults in this rural community. That's the data I looked at in 2021. Now, they said they have digital subsidy, promoting low-cost accounts and mobile wallets to reduce travel costs. But mobile wallet really has not worked. Maybe this is something organization like MoneyPoint or OPay wants to look at, because if you go to East Africa, particularly in Kenya, you have M-Pesa, where you don't even need internet access. And we've seen how mobile money has really empowered women in East Africa using M-Pesa. So hopefully they can bring about this digital subsidy. But I think there's a gap also in terms of partnership because we've not seen a lot of collaboration between NGOs and banks. A lot of time when non-governmental organizations approach banks, they only focus on corporate social responsibility. There's a lot, civil society and NGOs can do in terms of helping banks to bridge that gap, because there's a trust deficit between financial institution, the financial inclusion drive with financial institution themselves. But there's trust within the civil society because they work in communities. And I think if we can curb that gap, we can have a tailored design savings and credit product for rural women. And there's need for more advocacy, how we can talk to Central Bank of Nigeria, for instance, or another financial institution, particularly both regulators and direct implementers, maybe the budget office, the Ministry of Finance, so we can open this window and ensure that gender disaggregated data are reported. Because again, when I was doing my research, there's a lot of data that you cannot find or you cannot get. Maybe I would stop now, but maybe I should stop by saying the World Bank had committed about $500 million for Nigerian women. So they have a program to enhance financial opportunity. But I've not found specific data, specific information how these funds is faring and what are the impacts of this fund. So maybe when I get an opportunity, I can talk about a bit about community engagements and just share call to action. But thank you for the opportunity to contribute.
And I can hear thank you very much. I like to see opportunity for businesses to actually moving on to our next speaker, thank you very much. And you're welcome to this conversation today. Yeah. Ms. Jayo.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So your line is breaking up my end. I just believed that you called me up. That's why I just put on my camera and decided to just, yes. So since you can hear me clearly, I guess that we can go on with the conversation, so long as others can also hear me clearly. So there are a number of issues involved in all the situations that we are talking about. And when you look at it holistically, you are kind of caught in the middle. As a female, you begin to realize that the world as it was before is fast changing. our mothers in the 80s and the 70s, even up to the early 90s. I mean, the things that they went through. As children, many saw it and saw that these women also maybe did not have the power, the capacity, the reach, the technology, the advancement to be able to proclaim their rights or even seek some amendments to existing laws in so many regards. And so many of those children, many of us, watching our mothers grow and watching neighbors and watching women and understanding that it seems that right seems curtailed, right seems limited, that actually made a lot of women seek desperately changes. But in seeking change, there are so many limitations when it comes to the rights of women and the rights of children. If you look at our laws as an example, I will come to the issue of maternal as well as the current economic challenges and the reversed progress that we have noticed in the last few years, given the inflation rates in the country. We'll come to that. But let's start with the legal analysis of the issue. When you have a law, for example, criminal code that is applicable in the West and the South, when you have that type of law, and the law says if you indecently assault a man, it's a felony, and you are liable to 3 years imprisonment. If you commit the same offense against a woman, it's a misdemeanor, and you are liable to 2 years. What does that tell you? That tells you that even under the law, even by the drafters of the law, which I'm certain a majority in the male population, did not place men and women on equal pedestal. So if you are saying that if you attack a man and indecently assault, it's a felony, and then it's the misdemeanor for the woman, and then one is 3 years, the other is 2 years, you are basically saying that the life of one is more superior than that of another. That's on one side. Now, even the penal code. Now, let's move to even the penal code. Let's talk about the penal code. The penal code that prohibits battery, as an example, or beating, or let's just say maybe things that can cause grievous harm, but gives an exception that except it is purposes of correct life, then it is allowed. What does that tell you? The life of a woman who is married is lesser than the life of a woman who is unmarried. That's what it means. And generally, as a whole, the life of a woman, whether married or unmarried, is lesser than that of a man. Places the man on higher pedestal. That's also the law. Let's come back again to the criminal code. Let's look at section 221 of the criminal code that talks about indecent assaults against a female who is above 13 but less than 16. What does the law say? The law says that where that female is being indecently assaulted, she would not get justice by the uncorroborated evidence of one witness. Let me put that in context. If I'm passing by and I see a man indecently assaulting a girl that is age 14, as an example, for her to get justice, I have to not douse the situation, not do anything, not stop it. I have to go and look for another witness so that we are two. And then I will now find somebody and say, come and see what is happening here. Then the two of us will see it so that the two of us can be able to give evidence. Then one person will corroborate the other. But if I see the lady being indecently assaulted, for instance, in an uncompleted building, and in the heat of the moment, I'm seeing what is happening, and I go there, and I try to get that lady off, and we both go to the police station, and we go and report this incident, and they charge that man to court, and I stand to testify. My testimony can't save that woman, because nobody will be convicted on the uncorroborated evidence of one person. It has to be corroborated. It's the same situation for somebody with unsound mind or an imbecile as described under the law. So if the girl is added, I have to put her in that situation and go and find a witness. That is what our laws. Remember also that until 2014, women in the eastern part of the country did not even have inheritance rights. They could not inherit until the Supreme Court upheld their right of inheritance in big 2014, that they could actually inherit properties left by their own parents or by anybody given to them. Now, that law or that authority, that case is celebrated. It's the case of Okeji and Okeji. It is celebrated. But let me tell you one thing you need to understand about that case. That case went all the way to Supreme Court. That case did not start from the Supreme Court. That case started from the High Court. From the High Court, it went to the Court of Appeal. From the Court of Appeal, it went to the Supreme Court, where it was finally decided that a woman has a right of inheritance. The movement and trajectory of that case from the High Court to the Court of Appeal and finally the Supreme Court means that at any point in time, when the right of the woman was upheld by maybe the High Court or the Court of Appeal, somebody was satisfied with it and appealed against that judgment. Somebody felt that this was not the right judgment. How can a woman have a right to inherit? And that person appealed against it at the High Court, went to the Court of Appeal, was not satisfied, appealed against it, all the way to the Supreme Court, which is the final court. After that court, there is no more appeal. That tells you the state of mind of some men and the challenges that women face in this current climate. But that is not also to take away from the fact that there has been progress. Look at the history of the progresses that have been made. It is by women rising up, speaking, making use of technology to advance their cause. And that is why today, to apply for passports, you do not need the permission of the father. You can go and apply for passports. You want to travel with a child? You should be able to go also as a woman with your child, ordinarily. But all this achievement did not just come by. And remember also that before, for you, when you get married, for you to change the name of on your passport, it's like a camel passing through the eye of a needle. All the documents you would have to bring, everything you would have to do. But those progress have been made now. And it's now easy. And you actually do not even have to change your name if you do not want to change it. But these are even recent progress. We still have a long way to go. But we take time to celebrate the progress that has been made by women. Women in different careers, especially male-dominated careers, continue to find it challenging. Now let's look at maternal health. Progresses that have ordinarily been made in the field of maternal health, many of them have been eroded by the state of the economy. Many of them have been eroded by lack of finances. Some of them have been eroded by inflation. A lot of them. The cost of living has skyrocketed. Even normal, regular individual. So before, we used to have aspirational classes where you just aspire, I want to move up this class, I want to move from lower class to middle class. Now you just want to stay alive. You just want to survive. Now, you just want to be alive. Like, let me just eat. Let me just find something to eat. It's no longer about, if I save this money, I would now be able to do this. You are constantly going to the supermarket and comparing products and buying the ones that are cheaper. That tells that classes are lowering. So you see this spaghetti and that brand of spaghetti, and then you are looking at this one is less than 10 naira, then it's less by 10 naira. You are going for the one that is less than 10 naira. No matter what. That is the situation. No, so tell me, a woman that cannot afford, she and her husband are still struggling, cannot afford to pay fees, cannot afford to keep the home, cannot afford to eat 3 square meals, becomes pregnant in a rural community. What do you think will happen? If she walks to the hospital, because cost of living has skyrocketed, cost of even sterile supplies for childbirth are beyond reach for many right now. With 5,000 naira, maybe you get cotton wool and a few other things that do not adequately take care of a woman and a child at childbirth. What does that woman do? Then she goes for herbs. She goes to a tradomedical home. And then she has her baby by faith. So what she does is also she intensifies her prayers. And so everywhere that the economy has gone down, she replaces that with prayers. And so she will spend more time in church than taking care of her health. She will spend more time seeking spiritual solutions to things that are obvious physical needs. If you are hungry, you will not place your hand on your belly and be saying, God, feel me, God, feel me. You need to eat. And as a pregnant woman, she would have to eat. But then again, what is she supposed to eat? How much is she? How much does it cost? So again, the inflation rate, the economic situation of the country has grossly eroded many of the progresses that were made in the last 5, 6, 7 years in the field of maternal child health. Even for tertiary institutions, facilities are breaking down. If you admit a woman today and you say, go and bring 70,000, you'll be surprised. She will walk, her family will run around, all of them will come back with 15,000 naira. That they will tell you, oh, please, just start treatment and manage this. And so the ultimate effect of that is that mortality rate becomes higher. When you look at the mortality rates, both maternal and child mortality rates, look at the situation of the country, and you look at the laws, you realize that as a woman, the future is almost very bleak. You realize that every single day, it's a constant struggle, not just to stay alive, not just to make a living, not just to earn, but a constant struggle to actually survive, both at home, at work, in the public, everywhere that you can think about, every single place. And nobody is excluded, not even you. Nobody is excluded from it, because when you think deeply, you will be able to give 1, 2, 3, 10 instances of discrimination against your person. So if I travel out of Lagos and I meet someone and we are talking and they admire the work that you're doing and everything, the next thing they're going to be asking is, okay, so you are here, who is taking care of your kids? Okay. But if a man travels, goes to do the same work, attends meeting, nobody is going to say, he's taking care of your kids. But the kids did not come alone into the world. It was a joint venture that brought them. And so we must continue to be gracious as people of the opposite sex. That's as men must to be gracious. We as women must be gracious to ourselves. And all these issues, frankly, does not even stop at the bulk of the men alone. Because I have the real question here. Who is raising these men? Who is raising the men? It's the women. The women. They are raising the men. And look at it also. When a woman is in a deep pit and is struggling to climb out and is asking for the ladder, who does a man send to take away the ladder? It's not a fellow man. It's a woman. The man is going to send a woman that like that, so that woman does not climb out and survive. So we are facing those.
I'm sure you have still have plenty to. I will come back to you again.
Thank you very much.
Say that this has been quite, your take has been quite sobering. Yeah, takes a lot of introspection. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll come back to you again. Before we move on to our next speaker, I would just like to remind us again that we have hashtags for this conversation, and that's hashtag #IWD 2025, hashtag Accelerate Action, and hashtag Punch Webinar Series. So please engage on all of our social media platforms, and we'll be getting your feedback. And I see some feedback in the Q&A section already, and the webinar chat too. I see there, and I'm going to be taking some of those before the close of this conversation. But moving on now to our last discussant, Melanie Ishola. I would like your thoughts, especially on media representation, systemic barriers and cultural systemic biases and cultural barriers that affect gender parity. Melanie Ishola. Yes,
Good morning. Good morning. Oh, it's afternoon now. Good afternoon. Please, am I loud and clear? Okay, thank you. So you can call me the girl with the louding voice, and that would be my way of reintroducing myself to you. And I think that's a way too deliberate and too intentional because of the kind of conversation we're about to have. First and foremost, I'd like to say a big thank you to the leadership of Punch Media Foundation, as well as Punch Nigeria Limited, which I am right here as one of them. And I have been so blessed. If I could show you things I've been jotting and writing from having heard Professor Simeon Fayomi speak, Adepeju, who just stopped talking, like I didn't want her to stop, as well as Hamzat. And I mean, pretty interesting conversation. Today, I'm looking at media representation, systemic biases, and cultural barriers affecting gender parity. I think one key thing I need to talk about here is the fact that this is how we bring media, us as women in media, into this conversation. For starters, I would think that I would look at definitions and what a few things mean. And I would like to begin, for example, with, women in media. So who is a woman in media? What do we mean by women in media? For me, this would be women who participate in media. And that doesn't just mean you and I, journalists who are women. There is a lot more. And I'll pick another keyword in my topic, or set of keywords, bias representation. And if I'm looking at these two words, I think I would understand it to mean for women reported by media and for women reporter. For women reported by media and for women reporters. And so lastly, I'm looking at gender parity. So it's interesting what I found that the European Institute for Gender Equality put gender parity as, and it's quite simple. I think it's about the simplest I've found. And this refers to the equal contribution of women and men to every dimension of life, whether private or public. And by all means, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a very convenient place for us to begin this conversation. So the key word for me there would be private life, or private lives of women. Now, how do you mean the key word would then be private? Private because for women, the conversation around success, identity, achievements, and what they are, how they're perceived, what they're allowed and permitted to do is first of all shaped in their private lives. And if we are looking at my topic in line with systemic and cultural barriers, then we essentially have to look through the private lives of women. So before a woman can be successful, of course, there's got to be a set of beliefs or orientation or grooming or whatnot, same as men. that doesn't exclude men. It's same in both quarters. However, I'll have us look through this way. If I may ask, how many of us had women when we were younger? And I know when we were younger, we should be looking at, on average, women here who were girls from 25 years ago upward or downward. It's either of the two sides of the coin. 25 years above or 25 years downward. You were girls, right? You were young. And if you could tell me within your circle, maybe not even at the national level, then we may be able to point to 𝑰𝒏𝒕𝒆𝒏𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍, we may be able to point to Adora Akwili, we may be able to point to Ngozi Iweala, and so on. But if you look within your sphere, your circle, your environment, your immediate environment, how many of us are able to say we saw women who inspired us, who led communities, who led organizations, who led things when we were younger? Unfortunately, I'm not able to have that response. Could be a poll for some other purposes. And then I want to put these vis-a-vis how many of us have seen women who cook, who clean their house, who give birth often, who attend to children, who must just be hands-on. I should think that a vast majority of us would stand up or raise up our hands and say, of course, that's how it is. And that's my way of looking at what is systemic in the issue of orientation and raising of women. So the bias already exists in how we define gender roles. When Adepeju was speaking just now, she has spoken to how at the end of the day, nobody would ask if a man was going to go back to children at home. If, for example, there was a meeting at work and then the man has to stay back late at work. Is that not? And I personally, when she said that, my heart just leaped for joy, because I recall being mocked as a woman in media. So my career has spanned radio, television, both in local communities, national television and radio, as well as private and both local, depending on where I've worked at different times. And I recall being on a private radio at a point, and I had to, of course, before I could sign off, and this was being a young mother, before I could sign off my duty, I had to say, good evening, you're welcome to the news at 6. So this had a lot of implications. I had children that were 3 or 4 years younger, and I had 2 children at that time. It meant, and often it happened, that the minders at my children's school have to be kept back at school longer because of a mother like me. And I work in a space, the media space, where our time is our time. Our deliverables are our deliverables, and there cannot be excuses when it comes to delivering on your stories. I'm sure we all know this, whether in print or electronic, or even the new digital platforms that we now have. The 24-hour life cycle of the news has placed so much pressure on both the male and female news reporters. However, it's a lot more peculiar for women, and this is what we're going to be getting to very quickly. Now, I'm going to move to what we seem to consider as why we know so little about women. So when we are looking at why we know so little about women, it is not just women in media. I'd like to go to health to talk about this, and here is why. I came across a very interesting data while researching, and I went to, I think it was a Harvard research, where they then looked at why a lot of women have, or women have not been used, right, a lot in experimenting on researching about the human body. Okay, and let me add to that, so that I am not accused to be, you know, women can be sexist too, to be sexist. But what I'm saying, so that I'm clear, is that research in health has been predominantly funded for understanding predominantly men's bodies. And of course, this has a lot of implications. I believe it's why we're shouting PCOS, this and that today, and we are wondering what's PCOS again. And not so much is known, not so much is done, not so much solution has been provided as of yet for my sisters who still have to grapple with the side effects of PCOS. And PCOS has so many other issues, even what you may consider a trivial issue like menstruation. Now, I'm going to leave that and quickly land on my point to say, so that's for human. How about we go to the fact that even for mice or rats, simply put, that is used in research, not much or many researchers would use female rats in their research. Why? Again, because it's been said that you have to then look at the changing hormonal yada 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 of the rat's body. And so it would, of course, cost them a lot more in equipment. It would cost them a lot more resource to be able to effectively conduct that. But this equally has side effects. In essence, if you have not used my type of body for a research and you are recommending medicine, drugs to me, right, it then means that I can take it with a pinch. And also scientifically proven that women do react differently to certain medicines prescribed in a manner that needs further studies to be able to tell in what prescription, quantity, or what milligram or whatever it is. Please pardon the fact that I'm not using the right register in there. Now, I said all of that to provide a context to the fact that this is not just media, because I would not want to be guilty of prescribing my very beloved profession as toxic or as insensitive, but just to make all of us see that this is as much as possible generic. But I'm now going to wrap up right now, just before Kemi takes it away, by saying, so what are the easy barriers that have brought this about, that have brought this upon us? Now let's take the workplace, but let's take the workplace of a female media professional. So as a woman in media, there are a number of things that will further put my mind at rest. And do not forget, first and foremost, that we're looking at a situation where before I have left the house every morning, don't forget I spoke about our private life shaping our successes in our public life. Before I've left my house in the morning, and I sometimes complain to my colleagues and I say, I look harassed. You know, I'll be at work and I'll say, I just look harassed. Why? I've had to grapple with house chores. The decision's already begun the night before. And when I've done all of this, put it together, and now my children are delivered safe at school, I'm equally thinking. And in fact, most often, as I'm doing that, I'm grappling with possibly headlining approvals for this. I'm checking with what are we doing here and there, right? And all of these come together to impact sometimes your health and your deliverable as well as your success in the profession. Of course, my male colleague would come to work looking spick and span. And I do not say this or use this as a generalization. I'm aware of a lot of men who equally have been socialized to take on responsibility as cooking and doing house chores and what's not. We now understand to be a life skill and not a gender skill, right? So I balance it with that. However, to be able to say this has already placed a different, expectations and seemingly a limitation on what I'm able to deliver on. But I understood quite early in my career that there cannot be any excuse. And why can there not be? My work, my story is going to be judged with the same or by the same yardstick as a male's story is going to be judged. And by far, if I would love to go further in this career, I better be willing and ready to do 3 times more what my male colleagues, counterparts, and contemporaries would do. Let me quickly hinge on another factor that easily somewhat places a barrier, and it's the issue of gender pay gap. Like it or not, and we can subject this to debate again, gender pay gap is a huge thing, and of course, more so in the media, where you then expect that, of course, hello?
We will come back to this. And this gender pay gap, I think it needs a segment on this one. So just hold that.
Thank you.
I will come back.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
before you go, I just wanted you to bear in mind that this particular aspect of the conversation that I would like you to highlight, and that is in terms of media representation of women or of societal norms, and how this has affected women in terms of their growth and involvement in society. So we have heard the part of the women folks in the media. Now let's see how that has helped or how media representation has impacted the society general in a positive light.
Thank you.
So ruminate on
Thank
that.
You. Thank you. May I go ahead now?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So no, please. Just a moment, please. Let me get feedback from our audience, and then we'll come back to you again. Thank you. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, discussants, such awesome contributions so far. So I'm going to be taking some feedback from our members of audience. I think there was one comment on Mukhtar Mutari, why Professor Bolanle was speaking. He said, I do not agree with you. I think that was the part where she mentioned the fact that not all men are keen on voting for a female candidate. Muntari here said, I don't agree with you, ma'am. I witnessed an election where men voted for women. Adamawa is an example. Adamawa people voted for Binani in 2023 governorship election. I believe both men and women voted for us. Thank you. Thank you, Sekau Muntari, for that feedback. And I hear that Professor Abigail is here. So I'd like to take a few minutes, like 3 minutes, pardon me, to hear Professor Abigail's comments. Professor.
Yes.
Professor Abigail.
Okay. Afternoon is
right
now. Let me congratulate Punch Media Foundation for this program, and also to congratulate all the speakers for their thoughts on this subject of women and girls' rights, equality, and empowerment. There are a few issues that have been raised, and that we need to really think deeply about them. One of the speakers did talk about childcare and child support. There was a theme one year that talked about having child spaces in various workspaces. So I don't know, first, charity should begin at home. Punch, do you have a place like that, crèche, where women who work keep their children so that they can work? Because if the child is not well, join as panelists. Okay, thank you.
So, okay, would like to see your face, I think.
Okay. Yes. I would want to give
I meant Professor Abigail.
Oh.
Professor Abigail, we can't hear you now.
Hey.
You're muted.
All right, thank you. Can you hear
yes,
me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah. So if the child, it's not comfortable, if the child is not well kept, the woman will not be at peace to work. So I think that sometimes we do all the talk, but we need to do the work. And so there must be accountability by people who shape society. We have to begin to lead by example. In terms of lifelong learning, I think that I totally agree with the speaker. Some women are lucky enough to go to school early in life. I was quite lucky. I come from a family where my parents they gave equal opportunity to boys and girls. And you just can't find that in every family. So that's why I'm almost fairly equitable where I go to. And talking about the issue of mentorship, it's good to talk about mentorship, but it's also good to have mentorable mentees. Sometimes some of our ladies, let's be honest on this matter, they are not willing to do any serious job. You give them some things to do, they tell you that the stress is much. Some of us don't sleep daily till 4 or 5. Unfortunately, that's a lot. We have to bear the brunt until there is more equitable society so that young people can have people to look up to. I was extremely lucky. My late mother was a public servant, so she was my model. I can't recall so many girls in my own community that had the opportunities that I've had so far in life. But that solid foundation is what has been leading. And so even talking about the activities of men, how men shape the world, we are the hand that rock the cradle and we must rule the world. We should begin to talk about how we are socializing our sons. I have 2 sons. I teach them to love their wives. They are still young, of their daughters. Teach them to cook. They are life skills. They are not gender roles. Society made them gender roles. And so everybody, all of us, we have to do the work, even from the home front. So I can't agree any less with the position. The society, the environment you grow up is critical. So socialization is where we should go to. And those of us who are in the media, there is a case now going on in the country about two people, a male and a female, in House of Senate. So people are talking about the private lives of the woman. Nobody's talking about the private lives of the man. We report all this. And so we cannot run our societies like this. And I would challenge most of us here, particularly those of us who are in the media and those who do research, is to go and read the works of Karen Rose, where she talks about the ordering of women, how women have been ordered. You describe us by our hairstyle. You describe us by the kind of clothes we wear. You don't talk about men. You talk about how many children they have had from different marriages. You don't talk about how many girls they have impregnated. And those are not the deliverables. Those are not the reasons we send them there. There should be issues. We bring them to account on what they do. You want to stop me?
Thank
If you want to stop
yes,
me, I'm going to stop. But I'm also saying that media representation is reality. And that consciousness must be there in content development. And it has to be a conscious thing. And I would like Punch to lead in this because you have done well enough for this seminar. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Professor
Abigail.
That was loaded. That was very insightful. And yeah, it's like sharing the fears, or should I say sharing everything. Everybody's getting their part in this conversation.
I'm shaking the table, including shaking Punch.
I'm shaking the table, yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. Okay, we have another comment. We have somebody else who would like to contribute to this conversation. That would be Mr. Tayo Fatuna. Mr. Tayo Fatuna, you have 2 minutes. I'm actually running out of time. Mr. Tayo Fatuna, are you still on this conversation? This call? Okay. While we wait and see if Mr. Fatuna is there, we'll keep on. We'll move this conversation along, and that means I'm going to be going back to my speakers. I'm sure Professor Bolande and Fayomi has something to say. I think so. I'm going to let her talk more about it. But specifically, I wanted us to share our thoughts. You remember I said at the beginning of this conversation that this is a solution-driven conversation. It's not just about talk. It's to highlight solutions, things that we can take and then move on from there. So I'm going to, before you come on to share your thoughts about the things that you want to respond to, I'm just going to be asking these specifically. In your earlier comments, you mentioned that women are not busy, or that we are burdened with so many other responsibilities. So I would like to ask, what areas do you think society, earlier you mentioned childcare that is really not available.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm asking society generally can put in place to ensure that women's work too.
That is lesser. That women's work is lesser.
No,
is that what you
not that it is lesser, that it shows that the different areas that we extend ourselves, that it actually counts, that it is seen.
Okay. All right, let me start from the question that was asked about this our politician Aisha to Binani. The election was followed closely by many of us that were in gender. And it was interesting that she came up eventually as winner. She has also been a senator before. I hope you know that. But until now, I'm not sure whether she was pronounced governor. You know? Oh, yes, I wasn't sure. And we're now talking about 25 years of democracy in Nigeria. How many women have been able to come up, and men and women have voted for them to that height? Did you also observe that we never had a female vice president? Have you observed that we are not even talking about, female presidents in any way? There are people who are coming up, but nobody is really given a chance to them. And this is what we are talking about. There is also another person who was elected in Anambra State, I think, Virginia 𝑰𝒏𝒕𝒆𝒏𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏. Yes. It was because there was rancor. It was because there was trouble. That was why she came into governance, as the governor then. And they didn't let her stay. She stayed just some few months and she was out, of the game again. I'm just saying that for us, I'm not even critical about men, not voting for women traditionally, or we can look at that from the perspective of our life in Nigeria here. But for women, you hardly find women coming out strongly for another woman. And I think that was one thing Melanie was talking about. Even in our professions, many women don't come out for women. Rather, we want to pull the other woman down. The men send us the job and we do it, like Adequate said, we do it for them. This is interesting, and that is what it is. Now let's talk about our social roles. I would not agree less with us to say that women do a lot, but that is how we are made. Women do a lot all over the world. It's not that, just in Nigeria, that is where we work so hard. No, women do a lot. And in fact, I want to say that today in Nigeria, we are doing much better than in most African nations. We are doing much more better. But you must understand that our social role is part of us. For instance, we were talking about, I think, was it Melanie saying that if I go to work, people will say, oh, how about the children? Where did you put them? And if a man comes to work, nobody asks him questions. Yes, it is normal, because even your children will ask, where is mommy? Rather, even if the father is seated here, they will still ask, where is mom? That is who we are. We are not also seceding our spaces to men. That is who I am. In my son's life, in the people's life around me, that is who I am. People miss me when I'm not there. That is who I am. I am not seceding that to wanting to be equal to man at work. No. When I'm at work, my children know I'm at work, and my family also know I am at work. That is the difference. That is what made me a woman. Yeah, so we are not very
What structures can society put in place, or government or businesses?
One of the structures. Okay, please go on. Let me hear you clearly.
Structures that can be put in place to ensure
to help women.
To help women.
Okay. The first
I
one.
have one.
Yeah. The first one is let them give us child care support. I find that very interesting. Let them give us child care support. If I have 2 children, let them pay me for taking care of these children. It's done all over the world, and it makes women much more comfortable. Here, nothing like that. That is the first one. The second one is in my workplace, let them give me equal access to everything that men also have access to. Okay, in the academics, maybe we're trying to walk into that, but it's still not as it should be. Men have this way of pushing down women and saying that, have you not noticed that when a woman is climbing, they start talking about her and saying she has sexual relationship with people? And they just assume that if you are there and you are on top, then you must have been sleeping around or something. That is unfair. And all of us know that is unfair. But I'm just saying that let government put it in place. And I think they have done a lot of that. All of these things are written for women. Some of these laws have gone through. There is a law that says that women must have 40% chances in election and all of that. But they are not just being, yes, and they are not being practiced. So these are the things, the structures are there. Yes. Thank you very much for having me.
Prof.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Mr. Hamzat, I've got a question for you. And Mr. Hamzat, In terms of, earlier you mentioned, you were talking about the gaps that we have in this space, in the space that you spoke about. So specifically, I would like to ask, what products do you think can a collaboration between NGOs and banks? What products do you think can come out of that collaboration that will drive financial inclusion? 1 minute, sir.
Well, thank you. I think first is to even do a needs assessment. Because before you come up with any product, you must first understand the market, understand the gaps, and also the needs of women, particularly entrepreneurs, women that need financial incentive for their small scale business. So first is to carry out a needs assessment. We're working closely with civil society, research institution, with the media, because as you do this, you must continue to educate people, because we need a mindset shift and change. And to do that on a large scale, you need to work with journalists and media houses so that this information can reach, the grassroots, but also, see traditional religious institution as an ally on this front. I think there's something I just want to say before I wrap up is, I think our solutions, we must start to think about our solutions as political. You know why I said this is whatever we do as advocates, as journalists, the people who take decision are politicians, or what you call policymakers. So we must see this as, a political problem that is in their needs of a political solution. And I say this because we need to rally and mobilize a lot of women in the corridors of power. Just look at what is happening to Senator Natasha. Imagine if we have more than 4 women at the Senate. And in politics, number really matters. So I think, we need to invest more in political education and exposure so that people understand that, in the eyes of God, men and women are equal. And I want to use this opportunity to apologize to women. The toxic masculinity is there, except we want to deceive ourselves. So I'm using this opportunity to say, on behalf of, the toxic masculine people, we're sorry.
We accept your apology. That was quite unexpected, but then that apology. I mean, that's something to do. So yes, thank you, thank you, Mr. Hamzat. Hey, Miss Adepeju Dayoba. Now I would like you to continue from where you, but now from the position of solution.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you have 1 minute.
You want me to continue from where? There's really, nothing to add to what I was saying before, especially because the speakers after me also took it up and continued in that trajectory, which brings to fore and to the front burner the challenges of women in all spaces. You would think that, if you are just a woman in the village and everything is fine, so much, then you find out that a little bit of progress, it becomes impossible because of some stereotypes. So again, for us, it's just to continue to press forward, to continue to push, to continue to break those spaces, break into spaces actually, make space for ourselves, and not just ourselves, bring other women along as we do that. It's important. It's important also that as women, we show possibilities, because the stories are lacking. As a speaker had said, raise up your hand if you know a woman who did this, who has done this, who has advanced. We don't have a female vice president, we don't have a female president. Some dreams are just, you just feel like some dreams are out of reach for women. Like, even if you dream it, you yourself, you cannot sleep and dream that dream complete. Like seeing yourself as the president of Nigeria, the sign of malaria or something related, so those are things that should be regular. You should be able to have dreams, pursue them. But then again, it is what it is. And we would not just resign to fate. We would continue to press forward, push forward, make room for ourselves, bring other women along, and show that there is possibility, so that other women can look and find examples and then use your own as an example of the progress and the path they will walk in life, so they don't make the same mistakes that we are making achieve even higher level of progress than we are able to achieve at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello, Ning. Yep.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Again, I feel like taking a cue from what Adequate just said, but for time, I'm just going to cut straight to the chase. And in wrapping up my thoughts, as I earlier began to share, I'd like to say I'm interested in looking at this part of the conversation as newsroom diversity, a must and now. And this is how I want to summarize a couple of things I heard so far. And something like, I think it's a working theory I have, that essentially in this ecosystem, humans are not the only ones that exist on Earth. But we take ourselves more seriously as a group and then look for the good of ourselves as a group of humans. But when you break that down further, and then you realize that in the human category, then there is woman, then there is man, it is then natural for you to expect that a man is first and foremost thinking of a man as he makes decisions, as he, whatever he does, whatsoever. So for me, looking at a media industry as we yet have, going by a 2017 survey, with a 10-to-2 ratio in leadership, male to female leadership, is something that we need to right now, head on, begin to look at. It's not enough that we're bringing enough women just into the newsroom, and we do not even have enough women in the newsroom across board, go electronic, go print, go even the new media, right? You realize that we have more men concentrated here and there, but even more so is the fact that we have more men in leadership positions. I want to share a funny story I came across of Mrs. Alaka, who said sometimes in her email, and for those who do not know, she's the head of Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism. Now, for those who do not know, right, often she receives in her email being referred to as a sir. And for me, this is huge, and we cannot just let it slide. But then it also underscores the idea that leadership is expected to be male. Nobody said a male cannot wash plates, clean poop of children that he fathered. Same way, no one has said a woman cannot lead, because then essentially the story of one woman will be the story of all women. And I believe it will take a woman to better understand and represent other women. When decisions are made at a table that has few women represented, you should expect that the decisions by far would not put proper cognizance to issues of women. The Senate, as we have a 10th Assembly, has 3 or 4. In fact, one is now being in the process of being recalled, talking of Senator Duangan. And so when you look at the 3 women, Senator Ivete came out to say, of course, we know that the Senate is not particularly friendly. The Senate is not particularly this to opposition politics. The Senate, if you allow them to keep talking, they will tell you more and more and more. Now, if you do not have a block of majority women in that house, then there is just a little, those paltry women in the house can do to advance the cause of women, even themselves, first and foremost. So for me, what are the winning strategies? The Beijing conference, and this is interesting because the declaration of the 1995 goes something like, we're going to have,
running out
yes,
of
please,
time.
Of time. So let me wrap up my thought.
Please.
So let me just leave the Beijing conference and go to my winning strategies. There is a principle of shared consciousness. So do women vote women? Yes. We can only talk about the percentage to which women, or degree to which women vote women. But do we now need women to constitute themselves into a block, understanding that they are, first of all, a group affected by the same phenomenons differently than how men are affected, and then are able to advance their own cause? And I may lastly then say, women have to tell their stories and be unapologetic about it. In January, I sat on a panel in Kenya where we were talking about filmmakers and journalists having just concluded some stories, films across Nigeria and Kenya. And I was the only filmmaker woman on that panel. I was not the only woman. The other women, 2 other women, were not filmmakers. I was a filmmaker. Equally, I was the only mother of the 6 of us that were on that panel. And it was then important that I shared what the impact of partaking in that fellowship meant to me, separate than every other person. I read the room and I figured it didn't really all go well with a lot of people. But again, I started all of this today by saying, I'm the girl with the loudest voice. And because I understand that you're not going to give me the platform to say it, I've got to seize it to say it anyways. Because all of this will, in the end, come together to give us the change that we want. We cannot keep quiet. You have got a win in your newsroom. You have to say it over and over again to the newsroom leadership. They've got to know. They've got to see what you're doing differently. You made a change. It has to be known.
We need to continue. We need to continue this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Kemi. But I'd like to say that silence, all of that I have said it to say, silence is not always golden. And it is high time we started to share our stories and tell it to the right ear.
Thank you very much, Melody. That was a powerful closing. Silence is not always good. Okay, I see some questions. However, I'm running out of time now. I'm going to see if I can be able to take a few questions, and then, but right now we have to talk about the takeaways from this conversation that we have been having since morning. And for me, I'm going to just highlight some of the suggestions and solutions that our discussants and panelists have come up with. And I'm going to go through them the way I wrote them down here. And one of them is the fact that Professor Simeon 𝑰𝒏𝒕𝒆𝒏𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏 mentioned the need for childcare support in Nigeria. I don't think we can emphasize that enough. It is high time that there is a form of collective engagement on that particular front. And she also mentioned equal access to education, because as I have seen, I mentioned the study at the beginning of this conversation and how education was the defining point that saw a shift in people's ideas and notions about white values. So I quite agree with this issue of having equal access to education can change the tone of conversation, can change our society and the way women engage in society. So Professor Simeon 𝑰𝒏𝒕𝒆𝒏𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏, thank you so much for those your suggestions. And then Mr. Amzat Lawal mentioned the need for a need assessment before we can talk about the products and the kind of the products that will come out from the collaboration between NGOs and banks. Yes, this past week or in the coming week, we will see quite a number of banks come out to declare profit for the 2024 financial year. Like somebody was asking me, what do they do with the money? Well, obviously now we see that there is a gap, a financial inclusion gap, and both the CBN and the other stakeholders have been talking a lot about financial inclusion. This is where we need them to work the talk. So need assessment in the area of financial inclusion to understand which products are required to improve the lot of women and the underserved communities. The other one that Mr. Amzat mentioned is collaboration, and I think that is very, very key in this conversation. Collaboration with media, traditional institutions, religious institutions, to be able to come to an agreement as to how women will be treated, as to how to break down the barriers, the systemic barriers, the cultural biases that have been sustained for centuries. This collaboration will help to break those, and then we can start on a fresh stage, on a fresh slate, and say this is how we are going to proceed when it comes to our women going forward. I think I actually actively look forward to that kind of collaboration and see what new day that would mean for Nigerian women, honestly. And he mentioned that we need to see solutions are political. I think that is very, very important, because at the end of the day, like he mentioned, it is every decision that is made is actually made by those in power. And the more we are able to engage and work with them, I feel like the faster results we will get. And I'm also mentioned that we got an apology. Yes, Nigerian women got an apology from that for toxic masculinity. Thank you again very much, sir. And then moving on, Ms. 𝑰𝒏𝒕𝒆𝒏𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏 mentioned the need for women to make space for ourselves. In this work against in this work for gender parity, gender equality, numbers matter. Numbers matter. Numbers matter. That's what I'm going to say on that. So Melanie emphasized the need for women to tell their own story. I think there is a particular adage that until the lion starts to tell its own stories, and all the stories about hunting will always be in the farm in the hunter's favor. It will always show the hunter as the triumphant one. So until women start telling their stories of victories, start telling their stories of triumphs and overcoming challenges and the systemic um, barriers that are always placed in our path. Until then, we're going to be hearing lots more stories about how women are, how men are the the Almighty. But we have hope. We have hope that a new day is going to dawn, and then we're going to see um, an improvement in the lot of women. So those are some of the highlights that I wrote down. There are more, but those are some because of time constraints now. Those are all that I will be able to take. And it's on this note that I would like to personally thank all of our panelists and everyone who has participated in this conversation. It's been quite a couple of hours talking with everyone and engaging with everyone. But before we go, I'd like us to take out the closing out poll. Third thing, I would like you to launch the second poll for our participants, and then we can wrap up this conversation. Why that is being worked on, I'll just take a few comments that I see in the webinar chat. Okay, here was somebody based on, I'm sorry if I murdering your name, but someone replied to my email as Mr. last week because they thought naturally I must be a man. Interesting. I think we need to accelerate actions into bridging gender divides in all sectors in our society. Thank you, Fund Foundation, for this. Great. Thank you. And then Moji Makonjola said, going forward, we need women to support. Okay, we have the poll up already. Please take the poll. We had a poll for those who didn't join when we started. We had a poll at the beginning of this conversation. And this is the closing out poll. Please participate in the poll and let us know what you think. This is now based off all the conversations that we have had this afternoon. It started in the morning and it started. Your comments, please participate in the poll. I'll just read out a few more comments, then we will call it a day. Okay, this one is specifically for Adequate. She said, I want to appreciate Adequate for her contribution and support she has given to women in our space. Women can do more and better if only we assist each other and support each other at all levels in society. I quite agree. I agree. Thank you. And then Professor Umar Osani asked this to say for Professor Abigail that should table there. He said, Umar Osani said, Professor Abigail said it all. Successful women must socialize very well with society. Society's narrative and of course children's dream is shaped by what happens every day around them. If a society can have a very proud woman who always comes back to make an impact, parents and society, associates in the society, we want their girls, children, and wives to be celebrated just like that. Well, great. Please take our poll and then we'll call it a day. Thank you so much. And to my panelists, I really do appreciate your time. We spent the entire morning 2 hours on the conversation, the chat. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Tech team, can we wrap up the poll now? Okay, thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Anytime. Tech team. Once the update on the poll, then call it a day. Thank you for everyone who has been taking the poll. I'll just read out the results as soon as I get there. Well, the results are in. For the first question that says, do you believe more investment in women and girls is necessary to achieve meaningful progress in your community or sphere of influence? The response, overwhelming response, 95% is yes, significantly. I say round of applause for that. And to the next question says, are you now more aware of how gender-based discrimination affects individuals? Again, an overwhelming 88% agrees and said yes, very aware. So the third question, what is the most critical action to accelerate gender equality? There are three options there, and the first option is stronger policies and enforcement. The second option says mindset shift, and the third option says equal opportunity. 49% of our participants agrees that stronger policies and enforcement is important. And I must say that they have made the absolutely correct choice. Stronger policies, intentional planning, enforcement of those laws, like the gender laws that we have that are not really being implemented. Stronger policies and enforcing those laws will actually go a long way in improving the laws of womanhood in Nigeria. Thank you again for everyone who took out the poll. Thank you so much. Yes, to visit Bright, more action is needed. More action is needed. And now I'll be calling on the program officer at the Punch Media Foundation for the closing remarks for today's webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being part of this great celebration. I call it celebration because it's to advocate and support the cause of development. You'll agree with me that issues that concern women are issues of development, and so we have to take them seriously. Hence the reason for today's engagement. Let me first of all appreciate and acknowledge the presence of the Managing Director and Editor-in-Chief of Punch Nigeria Limited, who doubles as the Chief Executive Officer of the Punch Media Foundation, the hosts for this event. Thank you so much, sir, for the platform and the support you give to us from time to time. To our distinguished panelists, thank you so much for your incredible and actionable recommendations. It's brought a lot of fresh perspectives to us, and it has engendered concrete steps that can advance gender equality in our various spaces. Once again, I want to appreciate the Punch Media Foundation, the management of the Punch Media Foundation, the Board of Trustees, for allowing this program to hold. I want to say a warm thank you to all our participants for the engagement, for the thought-provoking questions, for the commitment, and for staying true even till this time. We so much appreciate you. Now, just before we go, I want to say to you that we need to keep this conversation going. One of the ways by which you can do this is by following Punch Media Foundation. Of course, we do a lot of advocacy work around development, and we need your support to keep this going. Follow us on Twitter. We have dropped it in the chat box at PMF_Punch, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Punch Media Foundation. And of course, you can also encourage us by sharing takeaways an insight that you gleaned from this webinar using the hashtag IWD2025, hashtag Punch Webinar Series, hashtag Accelerate Action to keep the momentum going. Together, we can drive real change. Thank you and see you next time. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. And we are
Thank you so much.
this conversation.